Welcome back, everybody. Glad to see you tonight. Can you hear me okay on Zoom? Good. Okay, hear me okay in the room? Good. There too. You can get yourselves comfortable in a posture that feels suitable enough for about a 20-minute meditation. Just remembering there's nothing we have to do. Let's set forward an intention to cultivate what's wholesome, skillful, beneficial, healthy. And invite the whole mind-body system to rest into that intention. Resting and sensing, resting and feeling. The meditating mind is simple, not complicated. Establishing an intention, wholesome intention, and then feeling, sensing through that intention. Habit patterns complicate things. Thoughts, opinions, expectations. If we notice the complication, we can check the attitude. What's coloring the way we're practicing right now? Is it an attitude of wanting to get something, hold on to something? Or is it this inclusive, wholehearted attitude, its intention to feel what's here to be felt, sense what's here to be sensed? Or something else, some other attitude that's shaping the mind, shaping the practice, shaping the way the mind is relating to experience, to present moment experience. You might even notice that just this intention to be interested in the attitude might change the attitude. Soften the edges of what's unskillful. Include it. We often live through personalized habits to bear down on what's in motion, to attempt to hold something in place, to act out some habitual greedy tendencies to get or achieve. But life experience is dynamic. This moment is already in motion, life expressing itself in this very interesting way as a result of causes and conditions. It can be useful to incline the mind in a wholesome direction, towards inclusion, even including that habit to bear down, to personalize what isn't personal. Loving kindness is a beautiful attitude of inclusion. The heart's wholehearted willingness to feel what's here to be felt. Sense what's here to be sensed. To include the way it really is for us for now. All of the skillful and unskillful habits. To make space for that. So we're calling on this wholesome attitude of metta to accompany our awareness practice. as a way of remembering that goodwill is never far away. Closer than we think, available right here, and the heart's willingness to include. Loving kindness is this beautiful healing alternative to ill will, resistance, greed. And it's very simple to cultivate this attitude. And just remember that we care enough to be here, care enough to feel, to experience, to sense the way it is. If we can notice the way the heart is including, making space for what's already here. See if we can taste that expansive quality, expansive, generous quality of metta, of loving kindness, in the most ordinary of moments. Let's continue in silence for a little bit longer. Always okay to stretch your legs a little bit if you'd like to after meditation. Welcome to class 5. You've almost made it all the way through. Yeah, congratulations for getting this far. Hope to see you next week as well for our last class. In class 5, we usually talk a little bit about metta, or what's called loving kindness. Metta is the Pali word in this ancient language that the teachings of the Buddha were written down in and then translated into various other languages, including English. And this word metta is, so it's my understanding that it's closely related to the word mitta, which means friend. So sometimes loving kindness or loving friendliness or just love, but love is a little bit loaded for us here. So may not be exactly what the Buddha was talking about, but just this general sense of friendliness or welcoming, or feels like an attitude of yes to me. And we get to try on the words that make the most sense or that evoke that sense of that limitless, generous quality of the heart that's willing to include. Really, the function of loving kindness is to include. And to include what's already here is one way. And then to include greater and deep ways to kind of exude loving kindness in our lives, different ways to practice. Benevolence is one of the words that I like a lot. So, what is it? What is loving kindness? We can call it an attitude. The meditation that I just offered really used the quality of metta as an attitude for that we can evoke during our mindfulness practice. And Gabe will do, I don't know what Gabe's going to do, but something his own way. And one of the things that I love about the practices of loving kindness is that it's really feels like to me a real invitation into our heart's own creativity. Yeah, so how can the heart evoke that quality, that benevolent quality that's abundant and limitless and that's available here and now? How can that be evoked and experienced and generated, spread, right? And available to us when we're living, is when we're on the cushion. And so we get to be creative, sometimes with even words and phrases in our practice. There's a traditional way of working through, of using particular words and phrases and just repeating them over and over and over, and starting with a being that's really easy to care about, and then offering some wishes of goodwill, like may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be peaceful, things like this, over and over to the easiest person you could imagine, and then working our way up to a slightly difficult being, not the most difficult, but like a person who you're close to, perhaps, who you have a little bit more complicated relationship. And so from an easy being to a dear friend, mentor, teacher, something like that, to somebody who's neutral, like maybe the bus driver or somebody you see in the grocery store, and to somebody who's a bit more difficult. Yeah. And the point of creatively moving through these different images of people, bringing them to mind, evoking a sense of their humanness in our heart. The point is to see how metta generates a force all of its own. So we don't really know if metta is going to change the lives of our friend that we're using for our practice, but we do know that it has an impact on our heart here and now. And that good feeling, when we can learn to trust it, it grows and develops just like any other habit of mind, right? The strength of mindfulness, hopefully we're seeing, at least in moments, that that habit has a life all of its own. When it's cultivated, it becomes a good friend to us. Presence becomes a good friend. We remember it more often. And you might even notice just from taking this class that whereas in other moments, you know, we're just living our life, but now, at least some of the time, we're living our life with an intention to be present, right? And that same way, loving kindness, when it's evoked, when it's cultivated, when it's remembered, then just has a habit that we live through, right? The more often we remember to keep it in mind. So loving kindness, we could call it an attitude, we could call it an emotion. It might feel different to us at different times. We can call it a quality of the heart, a mind state. A wonderful teacher, Sharon Salzberg, wrote a book that I think is going to go down as one of the classical Buddhist texts, at least here in the United States of our times. It's called Loving Kindness, The Revolutionary Art of Happiness. And Sharon talks a lot about loving kindness in her teaching. And one of the things that she said is she often calls it a connection, like loving kindness is the art of connection. And I think this is pointing to how the function is to include, to connect and really make space for whatever's here. But she also calls it a sensibility. Loving kindness is just a sensibility, right? It doesn't really make logical sense to be in to evoke some sort of resistance or control with a dynamic moment, a moment that's coming together and falling apart, and all of the habits that have been shaped throughout history and through our lives and from the time that we were children up until now, for example. These are just habits that have been shaped because of our lives, right? And because they are natural habits that have occurred lawfully, then it doesn't make sense to resist them. It does make sense to understand them, to know them, and to practice welcoming the skillful, cultivating what's skillful, but also making space for what's unskillful so that when we feel it, the heart knows, like, oh, I don't know if this is really the way forward. I don't know if this is what I want to keep feeding, right? And so loving kindness is that like inclusive quality that's there that makes space for even what's unskillful. Yeah. So it's just sensible to do that because it's already here. It's already like this. It doesn't make sense to have some contention with what's already here. We might have some wisdom about it, right? That, oh, this isn't skillful. That's great. But it doesn't mean that we don't make space for it first. We have to make space in order to be able to feel it. And we know people in our lives or people who've inspired us who exude this kind of quality of inclusion. And they can be really inspiring to us. We might call that unconditional love. My wife and I used to have a refrigerator magnet that says, love me when I'm at my worst, because that's when I need it the most. Right? It's like that unconditional love, that unconditional acceptance, that willingness to be present with another human being or in a difficult moment because it matters, right? That it's a sensible beginning. And that unconditional love is not dependent on getting anything back, right? It's not a transactional relationship. It's like, oh, the heart's willing to say yes to this because it's actually like this, right? We can decide, wisdom can help us make decisions about what to do. But first it begins with a willingness to be there. It's said in the scriptures that metta or loving kindness is a great protector. And a protector of what? Like a protector of the heart that tips into ill will or tips into unskillful territories. Because that heart gets protected by this quality of love when we cultivate it. It's virtually impossible to be full of hatred and full of love in the exact same moment. Now, they might arise closely, But when there's a lot of love being cultivated, like I said, it has a strength all of its own. And there's not going to be enough space for the seeds of ill will to blossom when the heart is really strengthened by the quality of metta. I was on a long retreat once and practicing metta or compassion every day, virtually doing the same meditation, and every day feeling like nothing is happening. This is for many weeks. And sometimes it feels like that. Sometimes it feels like, well, I don't really notice the quality of metta that's here and now because we're not used to noticing all the variety of the flavors of metta, or that subtlety of the heart that's willing to include. It's just not that warm. It's not that vibrant. So we miss it. And then it gets evoked by something and we realize how strong it is. So practicing metta or compassion every day, and then thinking nothing's happening every day, and getting home and feeling just like in love with the world, right? Just appreciating so much about, just so much about everything. And not just full of gratitude, but also tenderized by the experience of life. The heart that gets, the heart of compassion that gets evoked in the midst of suffering, for example. But it wasn't obvious to me that the strength of metta was being generated in moments, but then it will show up in moments when we don't expect it. So the great protector of the heart, because the heart can easily tip into these unskillful territories, especially being sensitive to the movements of greed, hatred, and delusion in the world, right? Sensitive to that, naturally defensive about it, naturally concerned. And so the heart can get hardened by what it's like to live a life. But when we cultivate this sensitivity, this tenderness of heart, the unconditional caring quality of the heart, then that's, has a life of its own. It has its own strength. That we don't have to trust ourselves to be able to do that. If you ask me, Shelly, are you a loving person all the time? I would say no. Do you think you can be loving in every situation? I don't know. But I do really trust the power of metta. And because I trust the power of metta, I trust it enough to keep cultivating it so that it keeps showing up in moments, you know? And it's really proven to be a trustworthy protector. Like during the early days of the pandemic, there's enough wisdom in the heart to know, like, you've got to do something. Yeah. The murder of George Floyd, that what gets the difficulties of being a human being, the difficulties of living human life, the heart can develop all kinds of defensive habits that don't add the kind of care that I think is important to add. But that metta really proved to be a very important force in my life. Yeah. So we can learn to trust it and to cultivate it both directly and indirectly, right? The direct cultivation is by doing different kinds of practices, like that systematic movement through words and, repeating words and phrases in relationship to an image in mind, a systematic cultivation over and over and over. And the power of that is that it's very simple, right? And there's not a lot to be excited about. And so the heart notices all the nooks and crannies where metta isn't available and makes space for that too. And then just goes back to the cultivation, the simple cultivation, like the same image, not a variety of images, but one image and repetitive phrases that are just very simple, very direct, because we trust the power of metta, because we trust the power of loving kindness, not because we're trying to do something ourselves. It's very useful to appreciate the full spectrum of metta. Sometimes metta will feel very warm, like a deep kind of love. right? Nod your head if you know this, like this kind of love, the deep kind of love. Yeah, warmth, the deep kind of warmth. And it's what's quite obvious to us, right? It's what we might think about when we think about love. But there is a lightness to metta that's the absence of something, the absence of hatred, the absence of ill will. So the quality of heart that's just not not aversive, it's not in contention. And it's every time we notice a flavor of loving kindness, it strengthens the quality of loving kindness. Right? When we notice an unskillful quality, it also decreases that potential of that unskillful quality. So the noticing is very important. We want to notice and linger in what's skillful, and we want to connect also with what's unskillful with a heart that's willing to include it. Because just feeling something unskillful when we're honest with ourselves, that sensitivity, we know this hurts. It hurts to be enraged. We don't have to have an intellectual debate about whether rage is useful because we actually know that it feels like this. Yeah, so we get a taste of that ourselves. And when we get a taste of the quality of love, that expansive quality, like I was in touch with when I came home from that retreat, it was very obvious, like, oh, this is a good thing to do, right? And the heart learned to trust it immediately. Like, oh, yeah. And even to trust it when I wasn't picking up, perceiving that it was there, right? But just to keep doing it, keep trusting it. Sometimes metta is used as a practice for stabilizing the awareness. In either way, either cultivating an attitude that comes along with mindfulness or by using those words and phrases like I was talking about, because the heart keeps returning to something that is really skillful. So it forms the basis of stability of mind. And it's a really foundational support to living a spiritual life, both because it's a protection of the heart, but also because it's really useful relationally. Right? Yeah. It just, yeah. I'm so thankful that my beloved has been a big fan of metta. Yeah, and actually is a good teacher for me because she reflects that quality back to me. And not that she's full of love in every moment, but because she really trusts it. And she trusts it enough to keep returning to it even when she doesn't feel it. Yeah. And that has really been a good guide, a good model for me. Right? And we can do that for each other and can see the value of that, how much integrity is there, right? In that willingness to trust metta. And then we start to trust each other because we feel that intentionality that a heart can exude, right? Even if we're not perfect people. Like, oh, I know you're not a perfect person, but I feel your integrity and I know you're practicing with this, right? And because I know you're practicing with this, I know you care to cultivate that generous quality of heart and mind, the skillfulness of heart and mind. And I know you don't want to feed what's unskillful. Just like me, we might both get mixed up at times, and I may feed aversive qualities, but I don't want to do that. And I'm willing to feel it. So we don't have to be perfect, but just being in relationship with one another and modeling for one another what it's like to keep trusting metta is very powerful. Like it really is a part of our integrity. I think I'll stop here. Thank you for your kind attention. I'll pass it on to Gabe.
So again, feel free to stretch if you'd like before we sit for another 20 minutes or so. It's said that it's especially helpful to be comfortable when cultivating loving kindness or goodwill, metta. So feel free to sit in a chair if that's more comfortable for you, or just do what you can to take care of your body. One way to get in touch with this quality of goodwill is to put ourselves in the position of the receiver of goodwill, remembering what it feels like to receive this quality of unconditional acceptance, warmth, kindness, how good that feels. So you can use your memory or your imagination. Maybe a memory comes to mind of someone in your life, whether a long time ago or more recently, that looked at you with kind eyes, seeing your goodness, and just noticing what that feels like. And if a memory doesn't come to mind, you could also bring to mind a more archetypal figure like the Buddha or some force of goodness, however it is that works for you to connect with, receiving unconditional goodwill and feeling what that feels like or what that has felt like for you in your body. Maybe something relaxes in your body or something opens up, feels safe, feels seen. And it's possible to even imagine that the space around us here and now has this quality of goodwill, or almost like we're being seen in this moment. So use your imagination, use your senses, whatever works to recall this quality and to put yourself in the position of receiving. and sitting and breathing in this space of goodwill, as if the space around us that we're sitting in has the flavor of acceptance, kindness, and we're able to sit in a full way, in a relaxed way, as if we're being gazed upon with kind eyes in this moment, eyes that see our goodness. Letting images come to mind if they arise that help you connect with receiving goodwill, kindness. Maybe different people come to mind that remind you of your lovability, your goodness. Maybe it's an animal that sees you in a kind way. Maybe it's a teacher or a mentor who has believed in you, supported you, seen your goodness. What is it like? What does it feel like to let in this unconditional acceptance and kindness and goodwill? It's okay if you notice resistance, you can notice that, but also connect with the truth that we have been the recipients in some way of goodwill. And again, even if memories from your life don't come, you could imagine a figure like the Buddha or all the teachers in the Buddhist tradition, including Shelly and I, that see your goodness, wish you well. This long lineage of people who see our goodness, going back to the Buddha and other figures, whatever works. You could imagine trees or places in nature where you felt held in some benevolence that maybe is hard to put words to. So again, use your creativity, your memory, and find what works. At times, you might feel some warmth in your chest or some other physical sensations associated with goodwill, with being in touch with this goodwill, this acceptance. And when you feel that and it's strong, it's okay to let go of any images or any words and just rest with that quality itself, appreciating its goodness, this ability to be in touch with goodwill, with our heart's capacity to receive goodwill and also to wish goodwill in return or naturally. In touch with this heart's goodness. Appreciating this heart's goodness and wishing ourselves well. And if you'd like, you could use a simple phrase like, may I be safe and protected in all ways. May I be happy and peaceful. May I be healthy and free from pain. May I take care of this life with ease and joy. And if you use a phrase like this, notice the effect on the heart. And feel free to experiment to find a phrase that connects, feels true to you. Again, if the quality of goodwill is obvious, you can simply rest with that quality as you experience it in your heart, in your body, appreciating it, letting it fill the space of awareness, fill the space of the body to whatever degree it will. It might even extend beyond your skin, filling the whole space of awareness as far as that goes. Space around you. So for the last minute, seeing if it's possible to sit right in the middle of a field of well-wishing, where no part of our experience here and now needs to be left out of that light of well-wishing, that kind gaze that we're sitting in the middle of. Letting it all be included, however it is now. Thank you for your practice. I know this might feel like it is a bit of a different approach, different practice that we're doing tonight. So thanks for giving it a go. And yeah, we have time now for any questions you might have about the instructions or what Shelly shared on this theme of goodwill, and as a specific meditation that we can cultivate, as an intention we can cultivate, and then, but also just as an intention we can cultivate informally as well in our day-to-day life. So yeah, any thoughts on that? Yes.
What advice, naturally, Gavin, they, them, what advice would you have for someone who has a difficult time extending loving kindness to individuals who have a fixed wrong view, specifically fixed wrong view that leads to bodily violence against others?
Well, one thing that's really helped me in this regard, specifically, was some teachings from a specific teacher, Tanisaro Bhikkhu. He's got a book, I think it's a little book on goodwill. And that's his preferred translation, goodwill. But, like Shelly was saying, there's many different words, and you can play around with them to see what works for you. But some of the points he was making was to sort of distinguish wishing well, goodwill, from other emotions that might be similar, like affection or just even liking someone. Like he gives one example from the teachings of snakes, and the Buddha saying to this, like, one way you can think of these snakes is something like, may the snakes be well and may they depart, because it may not be in anyone's, the monastic's interest or the snake's interest for them to cohabitate, right? But that doesn't mean that the monastics hate the snakes. They just understand that we shouldn't live together right now, but we wish them well. And so I think, and so even just as a thought experiment, what would it mean in the deepest way to wish well for someone who is actively causing harm? That doesn't mean that we approve of their actions. Wisdom may clearly understand that their actions are harmful. And we can even understand that when people act and cause harm, that in some way is not good for them. Even just on the level of their own heart, to be acting on a mind of hatred strengthens hatred in one's own heart and mind, and that's not a happy mind. They may be deluded about that. They may think that's the way to happiness, but it isn't. So the deepest form of goodwill to someone who's causing harm is some version of, may you wake up to the harm that your actions are causing to others and to yourself. May you realize that this isn't the way to happiness. So, that's just one example of the difference between goodwill and even, just approving of someone who's causing harm. But I think, it's just a really good question. And there's so many ways in our lives that this question is relevant, whether it's, political, leaders, or whether it's just people in our lives. And so that, to me, this has been such a powerful and continues to be such a powerful exploration. Because to me, I take the Buddha's instructions on this topic to be that goodwill is always helpful and appropriate. But then the question is, well, what does goodwill look like in this situation? What does it look like to keep my heart open while I may need to be very firm with someone and say, your behavior isn't okay, but can I do that from a place that I actually wish them well? So there's, it's something that we explore, but to me, the real intervention that I've really found useful from these teachings is just even that question: is it true that hatred is never helpful, that ill will, that throwing someone out of my heart is never helpful, or at least never maybe just to leave it at that, and that goodwill is always helpful, but that doesn't mean that our hearts know how to find our way there. And so there's just a lot of learning that happens there, and we never want to force anything. So if it ever feels like, oh yeah, I need to love everyone, including the people I hate, well, maybe we start with, can we be with that experience of ill will, and can we bring some kindness to that? There might be some fear there that we want to attend to with kindness. So there's so much that I could say. I'll pass it on, though. Thanks for that good question.
Hold on a second. Yeah, you need to use a microphone.
So they can hear you on Zoom.
So is that compassion then, as you're speaking through that? Is that compassion?
By definition, compassion is the heart that cares about tension or stress or any kind of resistance to life as it is. So we call that suffering, right? But that's that kind of being out of alignment with the way it is. There's some tension there. So by definition, compassion is that quality of the heart that cares about even that. So the different aspects of love, like general metta, general goodwill, is this just this general expansive quality of care, right? And then that same expansive quality gets evoked by suffering, or it can be evoked by somebody else's joy or good fortune. We call that something else. We call that appreciative joy, right? But it's that same expansive quality that's willing to take in the nimbleness of mind can take in, oh, this person is happy and I feel glad about that, right? And that same quality of care that's like willing to be stable in the middle of difficult circumstances, right? Like this is difficult, and the heart's not denying that, and is like willing to accept it the way it is. We call that equanimity. So different flavors of the heart that cares, which basically covers all the ground that we could find ourselves in, right? Yeah. Generally sending goodwill to ourselves and others, generally not needing to stop, not needing to kind of paint ourselves into a narrow place where everything has to be easy, but willing to accept difficult circumstances, willing to accept pain, willing to accept happiness, and that quality of heart that's like, yes, yes, yes. It's like this. Yeah. So compassion is the experience of love with suffering. That's the only way that compassion can be evoked. It's because of suffering. Yeah. That help?
Any other thoughts on this topic or another topic? Anyone on? Yeah, go ahead, George, and then I'll go to Elena on Zoom.
Hey, so I'm George, as Gabe said. I guess I have two questions, if I can do it two for the first one's quick. First one, I guess for Shelly, but for both of you, I noticed that you used the words skillful and unskillful a lot today to talk refer to ways of the heart. And I think I got a good sense of what you meant through the context of what you were saying, but I also thought they were interesting choices of words. So I was kind of curious your motivation or thought behind that term specifically. Then the second question is kind of linking back to last week. Got to figure out the right way to ask this, but we were talking about the hindrances. And I was thinking about how, okay, like maybe one of the hindrances we talked about was sloth and torpor. And if I understood correctly, that could be an obstacle to mindfulness. I would say an obstacle maybe to loving kindness in the same breath. But do you view it as, how do I say this? As like both cause and effect going on? Because I can also see how, like when I'm not mindful, I might be more likely to feel sloth or to chase sensory pleasures too, and it can create a sort of cycle. So yeah, just curious what you think there. I guess there's two questions.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer the second one and then let you answer the first one. Okay. So just maybe briefly, skillful and unskillful, I think are also, you could also use the words wholesome and unwholesome. And actually next week, that will be the main topic, will be this skillful and unskillful, because it's really at the heart of the Buddhist teachings. So it's something to continue exploring, and, skillful, unskillful, wholesome, unwholesome. Yeah, that idea that it's skillful, like it's appropriate, it's useful, and it's wholesome, it's beneficial. So those are sort of some of the flavors as I understand that word. Yeah. And it's something that, yeah, we check out for ourselves, and the Buddha had some thoughts on what's skillful and unskillful, but ultimately we kind of come to see for ourselves. And the basic definition is, does this lead to my and others' well-being and happiness, or does this lead to my and others' suffering? And that's kind of the difference. And then in terms of sloth and torpor, yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, maybe even more important than what I might say is just to be interested in it. And especially with something like sloth and torpor, sort of its function as a hindrance, as a covering over of the mind of mindfulness is sort of that like gooiness of like, I just don't want to be here. You know, like I see that in the mornings when I don't want to get up. It's like, oh, consciousness, no, I don't think I just more unconsciousness, please. um, so, um, but yeah, like, you know, like you were saying, what are the supporting causes for sloth and torpor? You mentioned that mindfulness and sort of maybe also the energy that it takes to be mindful can be an antidote to sloth and torpor, because sloth and torpor sort of has a story associated with it. This is something Gil Fronsdal said recently when I was on a retreat with him, that the hindrances have stories with them. And sort of the story with sloth and torpor is, I can't be with this, or like, this is too much, or yeah, I just don't want to be here. And so just to have to sort of challenge that story, like, well, I'm already here. I'm already awake. Like even if I have low energy or something, like I am awake. I might as well be here wholeheartedly. It doesn't mean I need to resist my energy state. Yeah, maybe this is a low energy state, but it doesn't mean like I have to believe that story, like, uh, yeah, that I can't be here fully for this experience. And that's something that we can check out, is bringing mindfulness to that experience. And it's almost seems like an oxymoron or a paradox, like to be fully there for a low energy or for sloth and torpor. But in my experience, yeah, something about the brightness of awareness and interest uh, just can sort of reveal the constructed nature of that experience. Like there's some story that the mind might be believing that is actually feeding that state of like, oh, I can't be here. And I found that just in my life more informally too. And like almost like that it's okay to have low energy states. It's almost like we can think that I need to be high energy all the time, as if that was realistic. But just because, but when I'm low energy, it's just going to feel different. And so kind of like that the awareness matches the energy level. Like I'm not trying to force myself to have more energy, but I can still be kind of, there can be a vitality to the energy that's, but that's just enough energy to be here with the amount of energy that's present. I don't know if any of that makes sense. That's kind of just a bit of my own experience with those states.
No, it does. Yeah. Thank you. That was great.
Okay, thanks. And then Elena.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm Elena. I use she, her pronouns. I find that I feel drained when I continuously extend love and kindness to a person who treats me with indifference. So my question is, how can I retain my energy when I extend love and kindness to someone who consistently treats me with indifference?
Like the question. Thank you. Just gonna echo what Gabe was saying about how there's a difference in the quality of care and and what the heart does with that. Like what's our response to that care? And there was there was an interview with one of a teacher of mine, Burmese monk Sayadaw U Tejaniya, during the pandemic, and somebody asked him if the question was, should I be sending loving kindness to Donald Trump right now? And his response was like, if you feel loving kindness to Donald Trump, go ahead. Right? But perhaps that's not the most important thing is cultivating that quality of loving kindness, and then it will go lots of places. And so in a moment of efforting to extend loving kindness, something else might be called for. So if there's tension in the heart, like some resistance to a person, their presence, whatever, if there's some aversion there, some hatred or some ill will, that needs to be reckoned with. That's probably what's calling the attention. It might be what's predominant. So in that moment, maybe the right move is to extend some, just the willingness to include that, which we would call compassion, right? The willingness to include, like, oh, this heart is inflamed right now. Because that's the most accessible place for these qualities of loving kindness that we can have different words for, like metta or compassion or appreciative joy, equanimity, something like that. But it's just that same willingness to include this and not jump over something that's here for something else. Now, with that said, there are different ways to practice. So this is, some instruction that I'm offering for a relational context. I assume that's what you're talking about, Elaine, is that right? Yeah. It's like in a moment with a friend or something, and it's not the natural tendency of the heart to feel, to extend loving kindness. Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Great. I also wanted to just name that what I said, skillful and unskillful, and wholesome and unwholesome. Wholesome and skillful are synonyms, and beneficial is also, we would call that a synonym, or healthy, a synonym of what's beneficial, what's wholesome, what's skillful. And they all maybe a couple of different Pali words, they're translations of those words. And those words are about like like Gabe was saying, what's onward leading. And another word is what's beautiful. And so what's spiritually beautiful may be different than the way we define beauty, but they are what's skillful and what's beautiful are synonyms, because with the good qualities of heart and mind that we want to evoke, that we want to live through, and we could all say, like, what are the qualities of our lives that we want to live through right now? And we would probably name a bunch of qualities that we would call wholesome. So they're not like special. They're really ordinary: patience, kindness, compassion, presence, wisdom, something like this, on and on. We could name a bunch of those. We would say when we cultivate those qualities, it's the expression of those is a really beautiful spiritual life. Yeah. I just wanted to make that point about spiritual beauty. Let's see if others let's see if anybody else who hasn't spoken wants to ask something first. Yeah.
Yeah, anyone on Zoom or in the room? Any reflections on the guided meditations tonight? If that was new for you, could be good to hear about. Doesn't have to be a question, but you could just share how that was for you.
I don't have a question, but I had like an observation. I noticed I went to Mark's retreat, like half day retreat that he did. It wasn't like last weekend, but the weekend before that. And I like ate right before a meditation, and I was feeling sort of like sluggish, and I was like, I don't know if I want to like sit down right now. And Shelly, I remember you talking about standing, so I stood, and I was like, I don't know, it just felt a lot better. And I had only really tried standing meditation like a couple times before. And it was just difficult. And I think that it was difficult because I was like trying not to move my body while I was standing. And then, yeah, it just reminded me of other times when I've sat and when I've been doing like a sitting meditation and it's been really difficult. And it's like, oh, I'm trying to like I'm trying to like keep a posture where I'm like, oh, I don't want my back to hurt. So I'm like trying to sit in a certain way. But yeah, I was like, oh, while I'm standing, if I like let my body move a little bit and I'm not trying to like be really rigid, I noticed that it was it was a lot easier to do. So I guess I was going to ask like if you had any other tips for like standing meditation. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, standing meditation is great. And because most of us don't have a kind of standing practice, it does take some exploration, like it sounds like you were doing, and maybe some tips. But I mean, as a first tip, like you were saying, to not keep the body rigid, but to be relaxed, obviously that is helpful. So like, yeah, because I think most of us think, yeah, either there's like two options: to stand in a really rigid way or to just kind of be kind of leaning or something. So you want to find the balance where you are standing, in a similar to sitting, where you're that combination of relaxation and uprightness and balance. And so the knees being not rigid, but a little bit bent. And you can have your arms out, kind of like with a tennis ball under each arm, and just kind of going through the different parts of the body and seeing, are they balanced atop the feet? There's a whole book on standing meditation by Ajahn Sucitto. His name Sucitto is Sucitto. I'm forgetting the name of the book now, but so there's a lot that could be said on this topic. So I would encourage you to check that out, if you're really into it. And it's a great meditation. I think part of the reason it's great is that, sort of like you were mentioning, when we're sitting, it's possible to sit in a way where we're just sort of kind of falling asleep, but when you're standing, you have to stay balanced, so there is all these little micro movements, how to balance the relaxation with the stability, with the balance. So just all those little movements is part of it, and sort of can keep the energy up and flowing. So it sounds like you're already on the right track, just through your own experience. But yeah, feel free to check out that Ajahn Sucitto book. It might be helpful.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There's time for, did you have a question? And let's use the mic so they can hear you on Zoom. Thanks.
Thank you for making space for me. My original question was that, Shelly, you discussed earlier how you had a mantra that you would use over and over again in order to center yourself around the subject. And I'm wondering if you would be so kind to share it with us, some of the examples of the simple sayings or things that you would repeat again and again.
Well, the classical phrases are, may you be happy and peaceful, may you be safe and protected, may you be healthy and strong. There's one version of some of the classical phrases. So those are the phrases that I would use in my metta practice. Yeah. I should probably leave it here. Yeah, the homework, or is it me?
Oh, I guess it
Yeah,
would be
homework.
you.
All right, so loving kindness practice, some suggestions for the next week ahead. It's been really valuable to me to have some interest in the different flavors of loving kindness. And it can be, like I said, the quality of metta can be cultivated directly, and it can be a kind of indirect cultivation in our daily lives. So, and sometimes it's already here, we just don't notice it. So a good question could be, is the heart experiencing any hatred right now? And go like, no hatred. Right now, the heart is not hating. And that's really beautiful that the heart is not hating, something like that. And just reflect that back to yourself. Yeah. And then in other moments, you might feel like a deeper warmth or something about metta, and to let that come back. And then any of its metta siblings or cousins, like patience or generosity or appreciation, just the flavors of that more expansive heart that's willing to linger in the wholesome, just to know it. So practice knowing the goodness of the heart so that you can trust that it already lives in you. Yeah, it's not only something that we need to learn and cultivate, but it's here a lot of the time. Yeah. Great. Thank you for your practice. Thanks for being here tonight. Hope to see you next week for our last class. Okay.